Hello, I'm Paul Reville. I'm a former teacher and school principal. I'm a parent. I'm the former Secretary of Education in Massachusetts, and I am now a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I'm delighted to be with you on this special occasion. I admire the work of generations, and I think, as you'll see in my comments, I find the work that you are all doing to be highly relevant and important in these times. At the moment, we're faced with an unprecedented crisis in terms of the nation's health, the world's health for that matter. And this crisis presents with us both danger and opportunity. I'm going to talk more about the opportunity today that it represents, but I don't want to underemphasize the danger that all of us have been living with day to day. But the silver lining is that this kind of a crisis brings front and center to the American public many of the inequities that those of us who worked in the field of education, and I'm now finishing my 5th decade of this work, many of us who worked in education have been familiar with and challenged by all along our careers. That is to say, this crisis is somewhat like a tidal wave that lifts the ocean off the beach, off the ocean floor, and reveals their deep, disturbing inequities that have always existed, that people who live those inequities, it's part of their day-to-day life. Those of us who dive beneath the system because it's our job see those inequities and see the problems they create for educators and for society more generally. But generally speaking, society doesn't notice them. And because there's a general assumption that school will take care of all things children, all things with respect to child development, and that school is the great equalizer in our society. And though that has not been the case, and all of the data that we can get together on education would show you that still in America in the 21st century, the best predictor of your educational achievement and attainment is your socioeconomic, your family's socioeconomic status at birth. That's not what America is supposed to be about. And schools have simply not been a strong enough intervention in order to correct the imbalance and the vast inequities that exist outside of school, inequities in income, in assets, in access to social capital, to say nothing of financial capital. So we have a vastly unequal society, and we expect schools, which take up 20% of a child's waking hours, to be able to correct for that inequity. And in general, that's been an unrealistic expectation to have of schools for the reasons that this crisis reveals. So all of a sudden on the front page, we're seeing that since school is closed, we need to pay attention to food, shelter, housing, healthcare, internet access, things like this, which we've always needed to pay attention to, but schools really haven't had an opportunity to do that. So what I've been arguing in the midst of this crisis is that we don't need, in our crisis reaction here, to simply restore the status quo, because the status quo wasn't working very well as it was, particularly in equity terms. What we really need to do is take this opportunity to pivot. Yes, we need a strong school system, and we can do much better in that school system in terms of educating people up to standards that will enable them to be successful in the 21st century. But what we really need more ambitiously is a cradle to career pipeline. Our formal school system, which is our early childhood, our post-secondary, and our K through 12 system, all linked as one continuous pipeline with services and with supports and opportunities wrapped around that pipeline. That's really what we want to build in our communities. Why do we want to build it? Because those of us who have privilege know that that kind of cradle to career support, 365 days a year, wraparound supports, services, and enrichment are what lead to the privileged classes having much higher rates of success, quote unquote, with their children than other classes. So how do we build that cradle to career pipeline? And that's, I think, where generations come in. We have a number of gaps if we do a gap analysis between what's ideal and what we currently have. And one of those gaps is the capacity of young people to read and to develop reading skill by the 3rd grade, which we know is a very good predictor of school success in the long run. Schools have not been able to do this on their own, not because they're ineffective, but just because it takes more than just what can happen in school. It takes added attention. all of our students are different. Some of our students hear millions fewer words than other children by the time they enter kindergarten. So the idea that the community comes together, I've argued that we should have children's cabinets, but programs like Generations come in and supplement the work of schools by bringing educated volunteers in to help young people with reading is precisely the kind of intervention sponsored by the community that we need if we're to build out that cradle to career pipeline and come anywhere near close to realizing Horace Mann's aspiration that schools in our society will be the great equalizer. So I commend you at Generations for your excellent work, for helping us to construct an equitable pipeline for young people. And I wish you all the best in the work going forward. I urge all your friends and allies to be as generous as possible in supporting that work.